They called her the quiet one, the waitress with the scarred arms and eyes that never quite met yours. People whispered, mocked, even pitted, but none of them knew the truth. That those scars they stared at, they were the reason a man halfway across the world got a second chance at life. The chime above the door at Ella's Diner, just off Highway 74 near the edges of Camden, Georgia, barely made a sound anymore. Worn down from years of use, it let out a soft, tired ring each time a soul came in chasing hot coffee or warmth on a cold morning. It wasn't fancy. Vinyl booths with duct-taped corners, local gossip mixed with the sizzle of bacon, and the same familiar crowd day after day. Retired folks comparing lottery tickets. Truckers making their third stop before noon. The occasional stranger who looked lost until they didn't. But the one person no one forgot was Maya. Maya Ellison, 36, blended in like steam off a coffee pot. Quiet, steady, always there. She worked the midday shift like clockwork, never late, never loud. Polite, yes, but reserved. Like her mind was always somewhere miles away, holding something fragile. People talked. Not about her service. She was sharp, on point. No, what caught their eyes were the scars. Deep, winding lines trailing down both arms, peeking from beneath her rolled-up sleeves. Raw-looking, uneven. The kind that made you wonder. Some said she'd been in a fire. Others muttered things they wouldn't dare say if she were within earshot. Needles.
Jail.
Something dark. No one knew. They just guessed, and let the guesses grow into stories. But Maya never explained. She didn't correct them. Didn't flinch. Just kept her head down, refilled mugs, scribbled orders, and moved like the past couldn't catch her if she didn't stop. A few regulars treated her like a human being. Mr. Langston, always at table 4, tipping more than he could afford. And Miss Clara, who called her sunshine, even when Maya looked anything but.
But most?
They kept their distance. Friendly on the surface. Curious underneath.
Too cautious to ask.
Too quick to assume. And Maya? She let them. Because some stories weren't meant to be told in small-town whispers. They were meant to be revealed in the most unexpected way. Most folks looked at her like she was out of place. Like she'd wandered behind that counter by accident and stayed there too long. They didn't say much, but the way they avoided eye contact or left exact change with no thanks said enough. Maya felt it every shift, but she showed up anyway, apron tied tight, eyes steady, heart quiet. That morning, the air was thick before sunrise. The kind of southern heat that clung to your skin like guilt. Maya walked in, her steps slow but certain, picked up the worn coffee pot, and began her usual loop through the booths. No chatter. No complaints. Just routine. She didn't spot the older man at the counter until noon. He didn't look like the breakfast crowd or the gossip crew. Maybe late 60s, 70s, lean frame wrapped in sun-worn skin, and eyes that scanned the room like he'd been trained to notice everything twice. His hat said 2nd Armored Division. His cane leaned lazy against the stool. "You want coffee?" Maya asked, already pouring. He gave a slow nod, looked up, and finally met her gaze. "You new around here?" she asked. "Just passing through," he said. "Name's Walter." She gave a small smile. "Nice to meet you, Walter. Holler when you're ready." She turned to leave, but something about his stare lingered a second too long. Not rude, just knowing, watching. And then the door jingled. Loud voices. 4 of them.
Young.
Careless. That kind of careless that feels like it's looking for a fight. Shirts half on, caps turned backward. One dragging his boots like even walking bore him. They weren't regulars, but they were about to be remembered. Kindly do us a quick favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you're touched by this story. Your support keeps us creating and sharing more powerful stories as this one. Thank you. Now, let's get back to our story. Maya saw them the moment they swaggered in. The smell hit first, cheap beer, engine grease, and a splash of knockoff cologne that tried too hard. They dragged 2 tables together like it was their living room, all elbows and loud voices. "Y'all got chicken fried steak?" One of them called out, not even glancing at the menu. She didn't flinch,
Didn't sigh.
just walked over with her pen ready, mask steady.
Yeah.
"Comes with mashed or fries." The ringleader, broad-shouldered with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, nudged his friend. "That'll do, sweetheart. And don't forget the hot sauce. None of that baby stuff." One of the others leaned forward, eyes narrowing on her forearms.
Damn.
"What happened to you?" His voice carried. No effort to whisper. The others followed his gaze, and then came the laughter. Hard, ugly, hollow. She didn't blink, didn't answer, just kept writing the order. "Nah, I'm serious," the guy pushed. "Those burns? That a meth explosion? Or what? You fall asleep with a lighter in your hand." Another round of cackling. Walter, still seated quietly at the counter, lowered his cup. His eyes had narrowed, and his fingers flexed once around the ceramic. Maya turned, walked toward the kitchen. Her face gave nothing away, but her grip on the notepad had tightened, the corners slightly bent. Ralph saw her come through the door.
Didn't ask. Didn't need to.
He just slid the ticket from her hand and went to work. She didn't say a word. Out in the dining room, the cruelty kept rolling. "They let that serve food now," one snorted. "Better not bleed in my gravy," another muttered. "She probably sleeps out back behind the dumpster. Look at those arms. Girl looks like she wrestled barbed wire." No one told them to stop.
No one called them out.
A few customers looked uncomfortable. Others kept chewing. The usual silence. The safe kind. Walter hadn't moved. He watched the table, jaw locked, expression unreadable. Maya came back with their drinks, quiet as ever. She set each glass down with care. When one of them sneered, "Easy there, don't want to get acid on my fries," she didn't flinch. As she turned to walk away, one of them made a loud sound with his tongue. Laughter erupted again. But this time, something else stirred too. And it wasn't just Walter's coffee cooling on the counter.
She paused.
Just long enough for Walter to notice the change, the subtle shift in her shoulders, the way her breath caught for half a second. That was all it took. He stood. Not hurried, not angry, just calm, deliberate, like a man who knew exactly what he was about to say. He laid one hand on the counter, steady as stone. "Hey." The laughter started to taper. Walter picked up his cane, walked toward the table with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen things most men wouldn't survive. "You boys think that's funny?" The loudest one leaned back with a cocky grin. "Take it easy, Grandpa. We're just messing around." Walter's eyes didn't leave them. "Any of you ever serve?" Silence. "What?" one asked, confused. "You ever wear a uniform?" Walter repeated. "Ever put your life somewhere other than your own mouth?" The smirk dropped. "Nah," the guy scoffed. "Ain't dumb enough to go get shot for oil." Walter nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "Didn't think so." The diner froze. Every booth, every table, every hand holding a fork or napkin or half-empty cup of coffee still. Even Ralph peeked through the kitchen, brows furrowed. Walter turned to Maya now, voice low but clear. "That tattoo on your arm," he asked gently. "What's it mean?" She hesitated, barely a blink, then spoke. 121st Combat Logistics Unit. Afghanistan. Walter inhaled deep through his nose, then let it out like a man trying to steady old ghosts. 2011? She nodded once. His voice dropped. "My daughter was there." The words landed like a weight dropped in water, no splash, just a slow, spreading stillness. Even the clink of silverware seemed to vanish. He looked back at the table. Rebecca Delgado. Combat medic. 19th Battalion. Kandahar. Helmand. Logar. She was there when the dust storms hit. When the convoys ran hot. That your unit? Maya studied his face. Slowly, cautiously, she nodded. Bravo company. Route clearance. Convoy ops. Walter's hand tightened slightly around his cane. His jaw flexed. But his voice? Still soft. Still steady. Then you knew her. You might have even saved her. And just like that, the room shifted again. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet, heavy awareness. The kind that makes people sit a little straighter. The kind that silences boys who think cruelty is just a game. Walter gripped his cane a little tighter, eyes locked on her like he'd just recognized someone from a dream he thought he'd forgotten. That was you, the one they called Trailer? Maya froze. No one had said that name in years, especially not outside a war zone. Only people who knew me in uniform called me that, she said quietly. Walter took a careful step closer, voice low but clear. My daughter, Emily, she told me about a woman in her unit. Said you pulled her and 2 others out of a burning MRAP after an IED. You went back for them, twice. Even after taking shrapnel yourself. Maya's eyes dropped to her arms, the faded scars, then slowly rose to meet his gaze. That was a lifetime ago. Walter didn't flinch. She said she wouldn't have made it home without you. The diner stood still, frozen in that moment. The 4 boys who thought they were the loudest voices in the room were now silent, one of them tearing at his napkin, another staring hard at the table. The weight had shifted. Walter turned to them. You laughed at her scars. You think they make her weak? You think that's funny? You don't even know what it means to carry those marks. One tried to speak, but no sound came. You mocked a soldier, Walter continued, voice like gravel. One of the rare few who ran into the flames while others scrambled for cover. Maya stepped back slightly. Her face stayed steady, but her eyes shimmered. She blinked hard. Walter turned back toward her, softer now. I never got to thank you. Emily always wanted to find you. She said you left the service? I did, Maya said, almost a whisper. Too many surgeries. Medically retired in 2013. Where'd you go? Nowhere really. Drifted a bit. Been here about 2 years. Walter lowered his eyes, swallowing a quiet ache. Emily passed last year. Lung infection. VA missed it. But she never forgot you. She kept a photo of your unit on the fridge. You and her, shoulder to shoulder, both smiling like you hadn't just seen hell. Maya exhaled, slow, quiet, like she was letting go of something she'd kept buried. Her hands were steady, but the tension in her jaw gave her away. Walter didn't look away. Can I ask you something? He said gently. All this time, why never say anything? She gave a small shrug. People already made up their minds. To them, I'm just the waitress with the scars. That story's easier to believe than the truth. Walter turned to face the room. His voice lifted, not loud, but with the weight of someone who'd earned the right to be heard. She didn't ask for your pity, but she damn well deserves your respect. He let that settle, then looked directly at the 4 young men at the table. Mocking her? That's not ignorance. That's cowardice. One of them spoke up, barely above a whisper. We didn't know. Walter's eyes didn't blink. Then maybe next time, shut your mouth until you do. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was thick, embarrassed,
Real.
the kind that shifts a room without a word. Maya stood still. Something had shifted in her too. The numb focus she wore to survive every shift had peeled back. What remained was something raw, worn, but awake. She looked around the diner. For the first time, she noticed just how many people had always been watching. People who never spoke. People who never looked her in the eye. Now their gazes were fixed on her, coffee cooling untouched in their cups. Then she spoke, low, steady, no emotion in her tone, but full of truth. You think I don't hear what people say when they think I'm not listening? She looked at the boys. Every day, every shift, every table. One of them tried to look remorseful. "I never said anything." "You laughed," she interrupted. "Same thing." There was no venom in her voice, just the exhaustion of someone who'd carried too much for too long. "I've had people leave a couple of quarters like I'm some charity case. Had women ask to sit somewhere else. Heard whispers like I wasn't standing right there, like these scars meant I brought it on myself." A woman in the back dropped her gaze to her mug, suddenly far too interested in the bottom of her cup. Walter stayed where he was, hand resting gently on the top of his cane. Maya turned slightly toward him. "I didn't know about Emily," she said, voice quieter now. "I'm sorry." Walter gave a slow nod. "She always wanted to thank you. Said she owed you her life. Hoped one day she'd get to tell you that in person." Maya blinked hard, then rolled her sleeves up just a little higher, like she was done hiding. Beneath the fading scars on her forearm, just barely visible, was a small patch of ink, an old military insignia, wrapped around 5 bold words, "No one left behind." Walter's eyes locked on it. Something in him softened. He didn't say a word. He just eased himself back onto his stool like the weight of what he'd seen had finally caught up. One of the younger guys stood, red flannel, tall, suddenly small. He looked lost, like he didn't quite know what to do with his shame. "I didn't know," he muttered. "I'm sorry." Maya didn't flinch. She looked at him, not with judgment, but with a kind of tired clarity. "Next time," she said quietly, "don't wait to know someone's story before treating them like they matter." He nodded slow, the kind of nod that meant lesson learned. Then he sat. The rest stayed quiet. One stared down at the table, hands wrapped around a napkin. Another just kept spinning the salt shaker like he was hoping it would say something back. The air hadn't cleared, but it had shifted. The discomfort wasn't directed at her anymore. It had turned inward. And now they'd have to live with that. Walter leaned forward again, elbows resting on the counter. His voice was low, steady, meant more for the room than any one person. "You know," he said, "I've met women in uniform braver than most men ever dream of being. Maya's one of them." She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't come home looking for thanks. She came back to silence and sideways glances. He looked toward her again. Because it's easier for folks to assume the worst than ask what's real. They'd rather fill in the blanks than hear the truth that makes them uncomfortable. Maya held his gaze just for a second. Then, for the first time all morning, she smiled. Not a mask. Not polite. A real one. "Top you off?" she asked, nodding toward his half-empty mug. Walter chuckled, the tension finally loosening in his chest. "Only if you promise not to throw it at me," he said. She grinned wider. "No promises." Laughter broke out from 2 nearby tables, not sharp, not mocking. It was warm, the kind of laugh people let out when tension finally breaks. Maya topped off Walter's coffee without a word. Across the room, an older lady at the window seat lifted her hand slowly. "I'll take another sweet tea, baby," she said with a gentle nod, her eyes kind. "And thank you." Simple words, but they landed heavy with meaning. Still, the room hadn't quite returned to normal. The stillness wasn't awkward anymore, it was reflective. The energy inside the Palmetto Grill wasn't just calm. It was awake. Maya moved between tables with her usual grace, but this time, the glances weren't quick or cold. People didn't flinch at her arms. They didn't turn away. They looked and they saw, not the scars. The story, the weight behind them. Respect had walked in quietly and taken a seat. Walter sat back, slow, sipping from his mug, his eyes drifting across the room, watching it shift, letting it settle. At the far end, the 4 guys were quiet now, heads down. The one in the red flannel traced the corner of his placemat like he wished he could fold time backward. Another sat with his shoulders caved in, chin low, guilt sunk into his posture. One of them, shorter than the rest, young, voice barely a whisper, muttered, "Sorry. About Ralph here." Maya didn't even stop. just turned her head slightly. He looked up. I mean it. I didn't know. I didn't think. She gave a small nod. That's the problem. Most of y'all don't. No bite in her voice. Just truth. Clean and quiet. The bell from the kitchen rang once. Ralph slid out 2 plates, then paused. You good? He asked, not loud, not soft.
Maya met his eyes, nodded once.
He nodded back, like that's all he needed, and turned back to the grill. She dropped off the orders, circled back toward the counter. Walter was folding his napkin, eyes low like he was still working through something. You really pulled Emily out of that truck? He asked, voice a little rough. Maya didn't answer right away. But in her silence, the whole diner leaned in. Maya glanced down, her eyes fixed on the floor for a beat, pulling from somewhere deep. There were 4 of us, she said quietly. We hit an IED. Emily was pinned in the back. Fire was coming through the side of the truck. Her voice slowed. I burned through my gloves, pulling her out. Didn't even feel it till we got back to base. Skin was already gone. Walter let out a long breath, the kind that holds more than air. She told me you stayed, he said, voice low. Even after the medics showed up. I didn't want her to wake up alone, Maya murmured. Out there, sometimes that's all you have. Each other. Walter stared into his coffee, like it could hold memory. You gave me years I never thought I'd get, he said. She came home. She had time with her boy. 3 whole years. That was a gift. And you gave it. Maya didn't speak right away. She looked out across the diner. A couple in the corner booth was quietly sharing a sandwich, leaning in close, smiling without a word. I'm not used to people really looking at me, she said softly. Not like this. Walter gave a slow nod. Well, they're looking now. At a booth nearby, a teenage girl leaned close to her mother and whispered, She's a soldier. Her mother nodded back. Yes, baby. A real one. And just like that, something shifted in the room. It wasn't fanfare. It wasn't pity.
It was respect.
Real, wordless respect. Not for headlines. Not for sympathy. Just for truth. Maya felt it, and she stood a little taller. Not for them, but for herself. Still, something lingered in her chest. Something unspoken. She moved toward the coffee pot, her hand resting on its handle, catching her own reflection in the chrome. She saw tired eyes, but also a survivor. Not broken, not forgotten, not unseen anymore. She turned toward the center of the diner, her voice calm but steady, just loud enough to stop the clinking of forks and grab every ear in the room. Before y'all go back to eating, she said, I need to say something. Chairs creaked. Heads turned. I didn't take this job looking for applause, she began. I took it because it was open, because I needed work, just like anyone else. I pour coffee, clean tables, and go home with my back aching like every other working person. She stepped forward, breath even, but something stronger behind it. But I've also carried bleeding men on my shoulders while bullets snapped past my head. I've watched good friends lose limbs, and worse. I've held my hand to someone's chest while they begged not to die, whispering prayers I wasn't sure anyone was hearing. Her words hung there for a second. Still no tears. No drama. Just truth. And for 2 years in this town, I've walked past whispers. Heard folks call me broken, assume things about me because of what my skin looks like. Not once did I ask you to understand my story, but I sure as hell didn't expect you to invent one. Walter gave a slight nod from his stool, letting the moment breathe. Maya's gaze shifted to the group of young men, her tone gentled, but stayed firm. It's easy to mock someone when you think they're small, when you think you're bigger. She paused. But it hits different when you realize the person you laughed at has done things you couldn't even imagine doing. The kid in red flannel lowered his head again, this time not out of shame, but reflection. She scanned the room one last time. Faces she saw every day, now looking back with something different in their eyes. "You don't owe me applause for what I did overseas," she said softly, "but if you walk out of here with anything, let it be this. One page never tells the whole book." With that, she let the silence do the rest. Maya turned and made her way back to the counter, refilled Walter's cup without a word. He looked at her like a man who'd just met the kind of person his daughter would have looked up to. Not just with pride, but with peace. A few quiet seconds passed. Then, near the back, an older gentleman lifted his hand and gave a single, slow clap. Another followed. It wasn't a standing ovation. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. Maya didn't linger in the moment. She offered the faintest smile, nodded once, and moved on. Still working, still standing. Walter drained the last sip from his cup, tucked a 20 under the saucer, and rose. "Be well, soldier," he said. She met his gaze, calm and steady. "You too, sir." As he made his way to the door, Walter paused beside the group of young men. He didn't lecture, didn't raise his voice. Just said 3 quiet words. "Do better." They nodded, no pushback, no smirks. Just silence. The door opened, the bell gave a tired ring, and the heat from outside drifted in behind him. But what he left behind hung in the air like the scent of something scorched and sacred. Business carried on. People sipped coffee. Orders kept coming. But something had changed. Maybe not the whole town. Maybe not forever. But in that room, in that hour, the way people saw her shifted. Maya wasn't just the girl with the scars anymore. She was the one they never really saw until now. Next time you cross paths with someone who seems different, someone quiet, someone who doesn't fit the mold you had in mind, pause. Hold back your judgment. Because behind every scar, behind every silence, there's often a story you've never heard. One that could humble you. One that might stay with you. So ask, listen, respect. Kindness doesn't cost a thing, but to someone else, it could mean the world. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Like it and subscribe for more inspiring and touching stories.